important thing is like knowing your mistakes, and like one of them here, most obvious to me, was the scene where they join hands, and you already noticed because of the way inverse kinematic chains are set up and the way they work is I had to parent it to something, but it keeps having to reset position according to the parent. So like her hand is backwards at one point, and then it goes upside down, goes through each other's hands, and a lot of times it's just bent in a bizarre angle, stuff you don't notice like in the final product that you just learn to ignore, and eventually it just keeps going. They're not even holding hands at this point, and it's just okay to not be that picky, because in the end no one noticed it. The same goes for the background characters. Like, I render out the background separately because it's lower. Like, my computer could probably not handle all of that action happening at once, and in the end there's so much blurriness by the spinning that it didn't matter. And then add in the background characters. For when I started off, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot, having accurate movement and some interplay between who gets hit and who ducks or dodges, or maybe someone gets a slight smack whereas another person goes flying. Working forward, you're like, you know what, no one's seeing this, and people I just start filling in with these bizarre positions that are just filler background movement, and eventually it gets so blurry you're not even gonna care. As I go further down, some of them I think are even dancing in the background because it's just not that important, and a person who's very particular about this sort of thing might care, but that's not my audience. Even then, you know what? Some of these aren't even rendered. Some of these are in preview format, and if you look closely, his arms are going through his body, and some people are probably not even standing on the ground. A lot of them are off center. It's just how you work. Same for, say, this pinnacle scene right here. I render out the background. That's all fine and good. Ground, gravity lift, textures are kind of iffy, yeah. And, I just kind of throw things into the scene. If you look closely, his sword is actually going through the ground. You don't see that in composite because composite means it's either on top or below, or behind. But eventually it went off camera, and then boom, we have a scene, and like the spark was added afterwards in director. A lot of that judgment is really, really important. Like, the most important composite would have had to been the shotgun kata, which if you look at it, I've got final frames, shotgun kata elite 1, shotgun kata elite 2, all the way down to 18 elites plus background and the sky rendered separately, and even more composites after that, including adding fog, which I had to hand rotate in between. Elites, which were added to the scene, they were all there, and because it's composite, it filled the scene up, giving you that impression, even though I some of them were lost in the fog. But eventually, once all the final frames are done, including the most important obviously would be the Master Chief here, which is, I think, some really great movement, despite him not being in the background composite, meaning there being no shadows. You put all that together, and you get one really great sequence, and in the end, it just comes out as JPEGs with fog and a lot of people, sometimes at different opacities. And the great thing about using director is, like, especially right here, I couldn't do this in Poser. He comes flying at the camera and loses opacity, just to say he transitioned through, rather than a clipping thing where you saw the inside of his torso. Add effects of blood. And if you look closely, actual shotgun shells coming out of the shotgun for every time he pumped the gun, where he had to, it being a shotgun. Little things like the butt of the shotgun, blood spurting out. And for those of you watching closely, I cared a lot about this scene. He really does pump it every time. Right there, that shot, he shoots it, pumps it on his shoulder, and then shoots the next guy. And, I dare everyone to look and find where he doesn't pump it for every shot and for every shotgun shell that comes out. I suppose you could theoretically say he didn't move it precisely, but there's the other shotgun shell. Pumps it through that guy. And in composite, it's actually behind him, but who could argue, and who could care at movement this fast? I wanted this to be one of the highlight scenes of, despite it happening really fast, I just love the movement that was generated, like, and the things that were happening. He doesn't technically, or she doesn't technically really move from one spot, more like, circular defense, but I was able to come up with some really good things. Like here, she does a spin kick after she blew off this elite's head. He goes flying into the air, does a spin kick, goes flying into the background, slices this elite's arm off, and then a very almost comical way just slams the top of his head. And he goes flying down. I would love for people to go through my work frame by frame and see, especially for this one scene, seeing the shotgun shells. And this one, which didn't translate so well, the last shot, she throws the shotgun and somehow presses the trigger at the same time to send that last hit. I think, all in all, this is probably the most work I spent, but for good reason, because it just ended up being worth it in the end.